Blueberries exploded across the gravel like buckshot as my son's grocery bag hit the ground, and the HOA president tried to hustle him toward her idling SUV. "Emergency safety review," she said breathlessly, one pearl earring swinging as she moved. My kid, 15 years old and quiet as snowfall, tilted his head and said in that calm way of his, "Ma'am, what's the passphrase?" When she blinked in confusion, he stepped sideways, planted his feet on the gravel, and announced clearly for my cabin security cameras, "I do not consent. I am being coerced." The visor lady's smile curdled like old milk. The SUV door stayed open behind her, waiting and hungry. I'm Marcus Hale. I restore old cabins and seek out silence. My weekends in Cedar Vale are deliberately boring by design. I sand wood, drink black coffee strong enough to strip paint, and ignore HOA newsletters that arrive shaped like legal subpoenas. My son Jonah stays with me 2 weekends a month since the divorce. He's the kind of kid who reads hardware manuals for fun and can troubleshoot a circuit board faster than most adults can order takeout. We have our routines. Saturday morning pancakes. Afternoon hikes. Evening chess matches that he wins more often than I'd like to admit. It's quiet time, quality time, the kind his therapist says he needs after everything with his mom. Across the cul-de-sac lives Deirdre Collins, HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood sheriff, who enforces something she calls bylaw aesthetic with a clipboard and the stamina of a marathon auditor. She's got a real estate license she mentions constantly and a husband who travels for work about 48 weeks a year, probably on purpose. She calls our historic cabin a splinter factory. I call it mine. That pretty much sums up our relationship. Deirdre's crusade against our cabin escalated from fussy to downright feral over the course of a month. First, she issued what she called a curfew for rustic structures. That's not a real thing, by the way. She actually fined me $200 for nighttime lantern glow, claiming it violated some made-up ordinance about inconsistent light pollution. When I pointed out that streetlights exist and my lantern was dimmer than her porch floodlights, she added another $50 for, quote, argumentative correspondence, end quote. Then she planted an orange flag in my garden, right in the middle of my herb bed, with a label that read combustible vegetation. It was time. Regular cooking time. But it got worse. She started patrolling the trail behind our properties with a handheld radio, the kind you see mall cops use. Every single time Jonah stepped outside to fetch firewood, even when I was standing right there on the porch watching him, she'd mutter into that radio, "The minor is unattended. Minor requires supervision." Like she was narrating a nature documentary about negligent parenting. She started keeping a log. I know because she sent me a copy with times and dates highlighted in yellow. Apparently, my 15-year-old walking 30 feet to the woodpile was a pattern of concerning neglect. Rumors started spreading through the neighborhood like wildfire. I heard through Mrs. Hahn next door that people were saying I hosted militia reenactments in the cabin. Someone else claimed my son was in danger of splinters, as if that was somehow a Child Protective Services issue. The whole thing would have been funny if it wasn't so invasive and creepy. Then came what Deirdre called a mandatory wellness inspection. She slid a form under my door at 6 in the morning demanding interior access to evaluate child-safe decor compliance. I left that form in the freezer so it wouldn't spoil while I decided what to do with it. On Saturday morning, I ran to the hardware store 20 minutes away for a box of square nails. In those 20 minutes, Deirdre made her move. She cornered Jonah at the trailhead with a neon safety vest and a voice sugar-coated in the way kidnappers probably practice in front of mirrors. "Sweetie," she said, "your dad authorized me to take you to the community center for a mandatory safety seminar. All the kids are required to attend." She even showed him a clipboard with official-looking papers. Jonah looked at her vest, then at the empty car seat she'd already set up in the back of her SUV like bait in a trap. The car was running. The door was open. She had her keys in her hand and was gesturing for him to get in. He tapped the panic macro on his smartwatch, the one that immediately texted his location to me, our neighbor Mrs. Hahn, and the sheriff's non-emergency line. The notification hit my phone with 3 buzzing alerts in a row. My stomach dropped before I even read the screen. Then he switched to the plan we'd practiced after his Aunt Lena, an actual FBI agent, taught him boundary and abduction protocols at the Teen Safety Academy last summer. He created distance, stepping back 3 full paces. He used a loud, steady voice that carried across the whole cul-de-sac. Vehicle is a silver crossover, license plate ending in 2QF. Adult female, approximately 5'6", attempting custodial interference without parental consent. Deirdre's friendly mask slipped. She lunged forward and grabbed his elbow with her French manicured fingers, trying to pull him toward the vehicle. "Ma'am," Jonah said, his voice getting louder, "you need to let go of me right now." She didn't. That was her last creative decision of the day. I hit the gravel driveway doing about 40 in a 15, phone already connected to 911. But I could hear Jonah before I even got the truck in park. He was repeating the passphrase challenge, something only family and a short list of trusted adults know. Deirdre failed it like a pop quiz in basic ethics. "Ma'am, you are not authorized," Jonah said, his voice never wavering. "Release my arm now." The sheriff's cruiser rolled in 30 seconds behind me. Our neighbor, Mrs. Hahn, marched over from her house armed with a holy trinity of evidence gathering. Her phone, a water bottle, and righteous fury. She announced loudly, "I have recorded this entire interaction in 4K resolution, and you are not law enforcement. You have no authority here." Deirdre tried calling 911 herself to report what she called a runaway child situation, but the dispatcher patched her directly to the deputy who was already standing 10 feet away watching the whole scene unfold on my cabin security camera feed. The deputy, a patient woman named Torres, peeled Deirdre's hand off Jonah's elbow like someone removing a stubborn sticker. "Ma'am," she said in that cop voice that makes everything sound like a final warning, "we need to have a conversation about custodial interference and filing false reports." 2 days later, the HOA meeting was standing room only and smelled faintly of lilacs and brewing scandal. Every seat was filled. People were standing along the back wall. Some neighbors I'd never even spoken to were there with folded arms and serious expressions. The energy in that room was electric. The board's projector lit up the screen with footage from Jonah's wrist camera. Crystal clear video of Deirdre coaxing him toward the vehicle. Her voice saying, "Your father authorized this." The false claim of parental consent spoken out loud where everyone could hear it. The moment she grabbed his elbow, and you could see Jonah trying to pull away. The open car door behind her like a mouth waiting to swallow him up. Someone in the third row gasped audibly when the footage showed Deirdre trying to physically guide him toward the running vehicle. Then came the audio recording from her own radio. The one she forgot was set to an open channel that Mrs. Hahn's husband monitored because he's a volunteer firefighter. Deirdre's voice whispering to herself, "We'll just talk to the board first, then sort out the paperwork." Like she was planning to kidnap first and justify it later. The deputy had cheerfully labeled that recording as, quote, "extremely concerning," end quote, in her incident report. The board president, a retired teacher named Gerald, actually put his head in his hands when he heard that part. The charges were read aloud to the packed room. Attempted custodial interference. Simple assault for the unwanted physical contact. Filing a false report with emergency services. The room went Baptist church silent, the kind of quiet where you can hear people's shocked breathing. When Deputy Torres served Deirdre with a restraining order right there in the middle of the meeting agenda, Deirdre reached for the ceremonial gavel on the board president's table, maybe trying to restore some dignity or control. But the board had already replaced it with a pool noodle as a joke vote of no confidence. It made a very soft, pathetic sound when she grabbed it. Somebody in the back actually laughed. The consequences came down like a hammer. Deirdre was immediately removed from the HOA board by emergency vote. 16-1, with her own vote being the only dissent. She was fined $8,000 in court costs and restitution. She was sentenced to 200 hours of community service at the county youth safety program, teaching kids about boundaries and appropriate adult behavior. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. She was barred from contacting my family for 5 years and legally prohibited from stepping within 200 feet of our cabin property. The judge also ordered her vehicle's rear doors disabled from opening without the driver physically inside the car, a humiliating and beeping mechanical reminder of her crime every single time she drove anywhere. Deirdre stood there in the community center, under those harsh fluorescent lights, holding that ridiculous pool noodle gavel, her face the color of old chalk. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. No sound came out. Just the long, devastating silence of someone realizing they destroyed their own reputation in front of everyone who mattered. The restraining order was still in Deputy Torres's hand, officially served, legally binding. Deirdre set down the pool noodle very carefully, picked up her purse, and walked out through a crowd that parted like she was contagious. Nobody said a word. Nobody had to.